morning.
Good morning.
My name is Team5Ryan. I'm a lead engagement partner on the audit of the financial statements of Fox Corp. Cordelia and Caesar, I know we both have had a few chances to speak over email, but I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down with us today. These audit committee meetings are incredibly useful. It allows us to keep you guys updated on anything we might be finding, and also to quickly let you guys know about any sort of adjustments we might be making so that no one's surprised.
Great.
On that note, I'm going to hand it off to Michael Mello. He's our senior manager, and he's going to get us started.
As Chris said, we're glad that you could be here this morning to join us. We have had a chance to begin the audit and to come out to your headquarters. And there are just a few issues that we'd like to highlight with you because we feel that they're important to you as audit committee members. So also here with us today we have Alex Soresti and Paige Albright, and they're going to discuss the audit committee composition.
Hello. I was asked to review your interim appointments to the audit committee and give you some guidance in the future of how to compose your board or the board members in the audit committee. And the guidelines for composing the audit committee comes from the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and also the Securities and Exchange Act of 1934. So as you can tell, they're not directly accounting standards, but they do relate to corporate governance for the benefit of shareholders of publicly traded companies. And those sources give you three main rules for composing your audit committee. First is that you have at least 3 members in the committee, so you fulfill that minimum requirement, so there's no concern there. And the second is that each member has a background in financial reporting, so they should know all things finance and accounting.
Each member?
They should.
So all 3 of them?
It's particularly important that you have at least one expert.
Okay.
Because when you guys are discussing with us, the auditors, we want to make sure you have knowledge of all the relevant issues that we would be presenting to you, and can make those decisions for the benefit of your shareholders, and you should know the impact on the financial statements. Thirdly, and most important, is that each member is considered independent, and those 2 acts further elaborate that independent should be independent from management and any executive officers of the company.
So you're saying we have a problem?
Potentially. Paige is going to elaborate on the impact to your company.
Right, so if we take into consideration what Alex said and take another look at the current structure of the interim audit committee, it may not be a best practice to have an executive officer or someone that is closely affiliated with the company on the audit committee. Ms. Davis, as an executive officer, you do meet the definition as an affiliate, which is what the standards say is not independent.
Officially called out.
Secondly, Ms. Rock, she's the managing director of Fox Corp's primary advertising group, and that could lead to some potential conflicts of interest. However, so going forward, I want you guys to recognize those independence issues in comprising your permanent audit committee.
So is there any issue with me sitting on the audit committee?
I believe for you to be independent, and as long as you have a broad business and leadership experience that could aid the committee, I think that goes.
I think I qualify for that.
So yeah, but going forward, when you compose your committee, you want to have members who are competent in audit, accounting, or financial reporting issues. And members should be focused on risk management, monitoring internal controls, and have that leadership or industry experience.
So as it relates to Fox, I think what I'm hearing is I need to review myself as well as potentially Kim. How soon does this have to happen? Can we get through this upcoming year? There's so much going on.
I would not recommend listing with the current structure for the entirety of the year. I do recognize that you're calling it an interim committee at this point, and I know that some of the questions you had was how to compose the audit committee for the future. So as long as we move that process along to make sure that we're in accordance with the standards, that would be the best thing for the company. So now Chris is going to start talking about proposed adjusting journal entries.
We're done with all the fun stuff. The first one that we found had to do with your method for allowance for doubtful accounts. We saw that as of 12/31, it was understated by $34,500. The actual amount of the understatement isn't really what we're concerned with right now. what really concerned us was in an email from Douglas Tanner, he said that the amount is generated routinely as part of a computer program, and that he thought that it was caused by some sort of software glitch. So what we're really concerned with right now is finding out the nature of this error, I guess you would say. Is it a flaw in the design of the internal control associated with the allowance, or rather the operation? And the nature of this error will determine how we respond to it. If we find that it was rather in the operation of the control, it's something that could be corrected with a little more substantive work and just a little more attention to the control itself.
Okay, so what have we found so far?
We haven't found anything yet. We haven't done any
Oh,
more
yeah.
substantive work on the control. But if we find that it is actually a design deficiency and that it was a computer glitch, we may need to bring in an IT expert and do more substantive work with your IT accounting infrastructure. So until we do that, we are not going to know that. And Paige will talk about the second adjustment.
Yeah, the second proposed adjustment has to do with the contingent liability stemming from the customer legal complaint. And so in accordance with GAAP, there are 3 criteria that determine whether or not you should recognize a loss contingency on the income statement. So the first thing is that the information was made available before the financial statements were issued, and I believe that is the case. The second thing is that the likelihood of future events will confirm that loss contingency. That likelihood is probable. And then the third thing is that the estimation of the loss is reasonably possible. Now, if you take a look at the deliverables, we have the copy of the legal counsel letter, and that counsel did in fact determine the contingency to be probable and reasonably estimable. So in accordance with GAAP, that would mean that the contingency should be accrued by a charge to income. Now, I know you guys had some disagreements over that assessment, but we do think it's important that company policy is aligned with proper procedures and standards, and that you are practicing reporting these contingencies as characteristic of the industry. So I'm not sure exactly what your disagreement is with the letter, but
I mean, I think we feel pretty passionate about our position on this matter.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we see any guilt in what we've done at this point in time. So
We don't feel like it's, probably gonna happen. It seems as if we reported, we're kind of saying, yeah, this is definitely gonna happen.
well, our concern with not reporting the contingency is that if this is your policy towards similar complaints or situations, that in the aggregate, this could become a material issue. So by not reporting it when it seems to meet the criteria in GAAP to report it, in the future, that could lead to issues.
Well, there's a lot of subjectivity, it seems like. I mean, maybe we take this offline and regroup.
yeah, I mean, it seems like we need to do a little more fact gathering, but I mean, management's telling us that we don't need to record it, you're telling us that we do, so there's a disconnect there, so we gotta bridge the gap.
The outside counsel has also sided on the side of recording. And we think that that's really an important thing for you to consider, because they're a bit more independent. Obviously, you feel passionately about your company, and we understand that, but they're a bit more objective, and they say it's probably likely that in this case you'll have to record it.
And I know you said you were worried about the appearance of guilt. Would you put this on your books? This is much less about the appearance of guilt and the admittance of guilt, as opposed to keeping with the principles of conservatism and really keeping with GAAP rules that are very important in making financial disclosures.
All right, well, we have.
Something to consider.
Yeah, consider that.
Now, one other thing that we wanted to discuss is the increase in the scope of services that we'll be providing you.
Let's do it.
We know that you just acquired Bow Wow Inc. and that your management is very excited about the new opportunities and the increasing capacity that comes along with that acquisition. From a financial statement perspective, your assets have grown significantly. I think they increased over $300 million to about $650 million. So the company is growing. And as a result of this expansion, we are also going to have to be doing more audit work. We'll be auditing more inventory, in particular the 4 warehouses that you acquired from Bow Wow. We'll have to send our auditors out there, which means more travel time, more hours spent on substantive procedures, and ultimately more costs on the audit side. And as well, there's also an increase in goodwill, which Chris will be discussing with you.
As Michael was saying before, this acquisition also brings new types of assets onto the balance sheet, and the chief one that we're concerned with is goodwill. We will have to test it for impairment on an annual basis to keep with GAAP, and that will present a significant new amount of substantive audit work that needs to be done. This will increase our budget from personnel and from an hours standpoint, and because of this, we've already had preliminary negotiations with Douglas Tanner to have a small increase in the audit fees, and I believe we're gonna finalize that number in a meeting at a later date, not right now though.
But can you give me a general sense of what we should expect, because ultimately we have to approve it as the audit committee?
In terms of a dollar amount increase,
Because what I've heard so far is the warehouses, yes, we have far more, but it's just inventory. Goodwill, sounds like those are the main reasons that we think there's going to be an increase in audit fee.
it is going to increase our budgeted amounts in terms of personnel and in terms of the time they will spend on site to provide the same amount of insurance that we had guaranteed before. The amount that we discussed with Doug was between $200,000 and $250,000.
So I mean, that sounds like a pretty big number to me. I think also, it's not just the big number of the increase in scope, but you touched on new assets on the balance sheet. How do we go about determining, what needs to be recorded up front? I heard the annual impairment test of goodwill, but, what's the process for ensuring what's recorded initially is accurate?
As far as the inventory, it's similar to the process that's already in place. You already have inventory, and those procedures will be similar. As far as the goodwill acquired, there's going to be valuation procedures as far as how much Bow Wow's worth, how much of that is goodwill, and that's reflected in the fees.
Gotcha. So that's one of the key contributors to the $250,000.
It's a big range, 200.
200 to 250.
And we can stick to the 200.
We can work on finalizing
Yeah,
that.
so I'd be definitely very interested, maybe when we regroup, to understand the level of audit effort with the regular audit and the increase of the audit effort you all expect to arise as a result of the acquisition. It's 200 seems like a fair
Well, I wouldn't
amount.
say it's a matter of effort as opposed to just a